The alarm did not go off. That is the first thing I noticed, and it should have been the first warning. The vault lights flickered, the air pressure dropped for half a second, and the case in front of me was already open, before my mind caught up with my hands. I was holding a piece of black metal that had no business being warm. My name is Aiden Cole, and until that night, the biggest decision of my life had been which corridor to mop first on my shift. I worked on Kesh Station, a trading post built into the hollow shell of an old mining rock, far from any world that cared what happened to a man like me. I cleaned floors, I emptied bins, I walked past the science wing 3 nights a week, past a locked room full of things nobody could explain, and one of those things was a hilt of dark metal that hummed so quietly most people thought it was a broken vent. I was not supposed to touch it. I was not even supposed to stop walking near it, but that night, my knee ached the way it always did in the cold hours, and I leaned on the case just to catch my breath. The moment my hand met the glass was gone, and the hilt was already fitting itself into my palm like it had been waiting for me alone. A voice spoke, not through my ears, but from somewhere behind them, deep inside my skull where thoughts are born. It asked me a single question. Bearer confirmed. Do you consent to remember? I should have dropped it right there. I should have run for security and let trained people handle whatever this was. Instead, my mouth moved before fear could stop it, and I asked the only thing that made sense to me. Remember what? The room around me did not go dark. It went quiet in a way that had nothing to do with sound. And then, all at once, weight poured into my mind, the kind of weight that comes from more than one lifetime. I felt hands that were not mine gripping this same hilt through fields of dust, through corridors of dying light, through moments of loss too large for a single heart to hold. 6 people before me had carried this thing. 6 people, chosen by pedigree and training and blood, had looked at what came with it, and every one of them had said no. The voice told me their reasons without shame. Fear of the cost was called rational by their own people. 6 great civilizations had looked at this weapon and its price, and they had walked away. I was the 7th offer in 400 years, and I was nobody important. A cleaner with a bad leg, and no family waiting for a call. I asked why it had chosen a station worker over a soldier. It answered plainly. Worth was never the requirement, willingness was, and I said yes before I let myself think it through, because somewhere under the fear was a small, stubborn voice that had spent 34 years being told I was a spare part in a universe built for better people, and that voice wanted, just once, to matter. The memories that followed were not gentle. I felt a battlefield the size of a moon pressing behind my eyes, though I never saw a single blow struck, only the aftermath, only fields gone silent and skies gone gray. I felt centuries of a language dying out, felt the grief of scholars who watched their people forget their own names, and underneath all of it, I felt the very first bearer, a farmer, not a fighter, who had picked this hilt up from beside a fallen friend, with hands shaking exactly like mine were shaking now. When the weight settled, the voice spoke again, and this time it sounded almost relieved, as if some old machine had finally exhaled after holding its breath for centuries. Bond established. Query, name for the record, Bearer 7. I gave my name, and it repeated it back with something like respect. Rank, irrelevant. Qualification, chosen. Then the station lights returned to normal, and I stood there holding a relic no one had authorized me to touch, in a locked vault whose alarm still had not triggered, and I understood that my quiet, forgettable life had just ended, and something far larger had begun in its place. Word travels fast in a small station, but not fast enough. By the time the science team noticed the case was open, I was 3 corridors away, the hilt hidden under my jacket, my heart pounding harder than it ever had during any double shift. I did not know why I hid it. I only knew that something inside me, some new instinct that had arrived along with the memories, told me that if the wrong hands found this before I understood it, everything the old bearers had protected would be lost. I made it to my quarters, a small room barely large enough for a bed and a shelf, and I sat down with the hilt resting across my knees like a sleeping animal. It was quiet now, no voice, no light, just a faint warmth that matched my own pulse. I asked it, out loud, feeling foolish even as I spoke, what exactly it wanted from me. It answered without hesitation. Restore the ward, complete the cycle, stand where the others once stood. I asked what ward, what cycle, what exactly I was supposed to stand against. The answer came slowly, piece by piece, like a story too heavy to tell all at once. Long before my people had ever built a ship capable of leaving our home world, 7 great alliances of the stars had faced something none of them could defeat outright. They could not destroy it, they could only push it back, seal a door against it, and post one bearer at a time to hold the key, so that if the door was ever forced again, someone would be standing there, ready. That ceiling was not a victory. It was a retreat dressed up as peace. And in the 400 years since, 5 of the 7 doors across known space had grown quiet, their guardians lost to time, their relics buried in museums and vaults, forgotten as ceremonial curiosities. Mine had been the 6th to fall silent, until tonight. I asked what would happen now that I had accepted. The voice told me plainly that the door nearest to Kesh Station, the one this very hilt had once guarded, had grown weaker with every year no bearer answered its call. My acceptance had not only reactivated the weapon, it had woken something on the other side, something that had been testing that door for longer than my station had existed. I did not sleep that night. I sat with the hilt in my hands, watching the small window in my quarters, half expecting the stars themselves to change color. Instead, morning came the way it always did, false and artificial, station lights simulating a sunrise no one on Kesh had ever truly seen. I went to my supervisor and asked for the day off, claiming sickness. She looked at me the way she always did, half annoyed, half indifferent, and waved me away without asking questions. Nobody on that station had ever asked me questions. That was about to change. By midday, the science team had noticed the empty case. Security swept every corridor, every worker, every camera feed, searching for whoever had broken into a vault without triggering a single alarm. I kept the hilt wrapped in cloth inside my bag, walking past 2 separate patrols with my heart in my throat, feeling every second like the ground might open beneath me. It was Grace Bennett, the station commander, who eventually called me in. She was not there to accuse me of theft. She had a different problem entirely, one that made my stomach drop the moment she said it. Sensors along the outer ring had detected something moving in the dark beyond our usual patrol range, something too quiet for standard scanners, something her chief engineer described as a shape that should not exist according to any known physics. She had called in every off-duty worker for questioning, hoping someone had seen or heard anything unusual near the vault the night before. I almost told her everything right there. The words were on my tongue, the confession ready to spill out, when the hilt in my bag grew warm again, and a single thought pressed itself into my mind with total clarity. Silence now. Trust comes later. I do not know why I listened to a stranger's voice living inside a piece of ancient metal, but I did. I told Grace I had seen nothing unusual, that I had gone straight to my quarters after my shift, and she believed me, because why would anyone suspect the janitor? That night, alone again, I demanded answers. I told the voice I would not be its puppet, moving through half-truths without understanding the whole picture. If I was going to carry this weight, I deserved to know exactly what I was protecting people from. It gave me a name then, an old word from a language that predated every alliance that had ever tried to seal the door. The word meant, roughly, the hunger beyond light. Not a species, not quite a mind, but something that existed in the space between stars, patient beyond imagination, testing every crack in every seal left behind by tired civilizations who had run out of will to fight. It fed, the voice explained, not on flesh, not on worlds, but on absence. On places where no guardian remained to say no. Every door left unguarded for too long grew weaker, until eventually it would not need to be broken at all. It would simply cease to exist, and the hunger would pass through as if there had never been a wall at all. I asked how close our door was to failing before I answered its call. Days, it told me, perhaps less. I did not become a hero overnight. I want to be honest about that, because every story I had ever heard about chosen ones made it sound instant, a flash of purpose, and suddenly a person becomes capable of anything. That is not what happened to me. What happened was slower, stranger, and far more exhausting. The hilt could not simply hand me power. It could only guide me, and guiding a frightened janitor through centuries of forgotten knowledge takes time neither of us had. Over the following 2 days, I trained in secret, in the maintenance tunnels beneath the station where nobody bothered to patrol, learning to focus the strange energy the relic offered, learning how to read the pulses of warning it sent through my palm whenever the hunger tested our shared ward from somewhere unseen. I was clumsy at first, nearly dropping the hilt more than once, my hands shaking from exhaustion and fear in equal measure. But something in those borrowed memories steadied me each time, the calm patience of the farmer who had carried this weight long before any soldier ever did, reminding me that willingness mattered more than skill. On the second night, Grace Bennett found me anyway, not because I had been careless, but because the station itself was beginning to change. Systems flickered without cause. Corridors grew colder in patches that made no sense according to any environmental log. And in the maintenance tunnel where I trained, she found me holding a glowing hilt that any sane person would have reported immediately. She did not scream. She did not call for security. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, studying me with an expression I had never seen her wear before, something between disbelief and desperate hope. She asked me plainly what I was holding, and for the first time since that vault door had opened itself for me, I told the whole truth to another living person. To my surprise, she did not laugh, did not dismiss me as a man who had lost his mind under stress. Instead, she told me something that changed everything. Her own grandmother had once served on a research vessel that studied similar relics decades earlier, relics quietly removed from public record after entire teams vanished investigating them too closely. She had grown up hearing whispered warnings about doors and hunger and the price of forgetting old promises. She had always assumed it was family superstition. Now she was not so sure. Together, we agreed to keep this from the wider station staff, not out of secrecy for its own sake, but because panic would only weaken our chances. If the hunger truly fed on absence and abandonment, then fear spreading unchecked through Kesh Station might do more damage than any external threat ever could. Grace gave me access to restricted data files, records the Ithsara curators had never bothered translating fully, assuming them irrelevant historical clutter. Together, working through nights neither of us could afford to lose, we pieced together a fuller picture of what the old alliances had built. The door itself was not a physical structure. It was a boundary woven from will and intention, sustained by a bearer's presence rather than any machine or metal. That was why relics like mine had been built to bond with a living mind rather than sit as inert weapons. A door needed someone on the inside who chose, again and again, to hold the line. The pressure grew each night. Systems failures multiplied. A supply ship arriving from a neighboring outpost reported instruments spinning wildly for several minutes as it passed through what should have been ordinary space near our station, though nothing was visibly present to explain it. Whispers began among the crew, not of monsters, but of something worse, an unease nobody could name. A feeling of being watched by nothing at all. On what the old record suggested was the final safe night before collapse, Grace and I stood together in the observation deck, watching the black beyond the station's shields. She asked me if I was afraid. I told her the truth. I was terrified, not of dying, though that fear existed too, quiet and constant beneath everything else. I was afraid of failing, of being the seventh bearer who said yes but still was not enough. She placed a hand on my shoulder, steady despite everything happening around us, and told me something I have carried with me every day since. She said worth was never about being enough on your own. It was about standing exactly where you were needed, when everyone capable of a better plan had already walked away. That night, the hunger tested the door directly for the first time since my bond began. I felt it through the hilt as a pressure behind my eyes, an invitation to give up, to let go, to simply stop holding on. Because holding on was exhausting and thankless, and nobody would ever know if I quietly failed. It was not a voice exactly. It was closer to a suggestion woven directly into doubt, using my own tiredness as its weapon. I thought of the farmer who came before me, a man with no training, no destiny written in any prophecy, who had simply refused to let go when everyone smarter and stronger had already surrendered. I thought of Grace standing beside me despite having every reason to report me to higher authorities and wash her hands of the whole affair. I thought of 34 years spent being told I did not matter, and I decided, quietly and completely, that tonight I would matter anyway. I held on. The pressure did not vanish instantly. It receded slowly, like a tide pulling back after testing how far it could reach, leaving behind an exhausted silence that felt, for the first time in days, like actual peace rather than mere pause. Systems across the station stabilized within the hour. The strange cold patches faded from the corridors. Reports of instrument failures on passing ships stopped entirely by morning. Nobody among the general crew ever learned exactly what had happened, and Grace and I agreed that was for the best, at least for now. In the days that followed, life on Kesh Station returned to something resembling normal. I still cleaned floors. I still walked past the science wing, though the vault case remained empty. Its absence explained away in official reports as an unresolved inventory discrepancy nobody wanted to investigate too closely. But I was not the same person who had leaned against that glass out of simple exhaustion. I carried the hilt with me always now, hidden but present, a quiet weight against my side that reminded me constantly of a door somewhere in the dark that needed someone willing to stand there. Grace and I began, slowly and carefully, searching old records for any hint of the other guardians whose doors had also fallen silent over the centuries. If 5 other seals had weakened the way mine nearly had, then 5 other willing hearts were needed somewhere across the stars. Whether soldiers or scholars or simple station workers who had never once imagined themselves capable of holding back something ancient and patient and endlessly hungry. About 3 weeks after that first long night, A routine relay transmission arrived at Kesh Station. From an outpost none of us had ever dealt with directly, a small research colony called Haviland, sitting far along the outer trade routes. Grace brought it to me privately, her face pale in a way that told me the message was not routine at all. The colony had reported a series of strange occurrences almost identical to what we had faced. Sudden instrument failures, unexplained cold patches through certain corridors, a general unease among the crew that nobody could name. Then, 3 days ago, all transmissions from Haviland had simply stopped. No distress call, no warning, just silence where a steady stream of trade reports used to be. I asked the hilt directly if it could sense anything from that direction, and for the first time since our bond began, it hesitated before answering. It told me that Haviland sat near what the old records marked as the 4th door, one of the 5 that had already gone silent long before mine. If a bearer had ever existed there, it seemed no one had heard from them in a very long time. Grace wanted to send a message to Central Command immediately, requesting a proper investigation team be dispatched. I understood her instinct, but something about the timing troubled me. Central Command moved slowly, weighed down by procedure and doubt, exactly the kind of caution that had let 6 earlier bearers walk away from their own doors in the first place. If Haviland's door was failing the way mine nearly had, waiting for approval through official channels might cost more time than anyone there could afford. I told Grace I wanted to go myself, along with anyone from the station willing to volunteer for a support crew. She argued against it at first, reminding me I had barely learned to steady my own door, let alone assist with someone else's. She was not wrong, but I reminded her of something she herself had told me only weeks earlier, that worth was never about being enough alone, only about standing where you were needed, when nobody more qualified remained willing to go. She agreed, reluctantly, and within 2 days we had a small transport ready, staffed by a handful of station workers who had grown curious and quietly loyal after witnessing the strange nights firsthand. Among them was Noah Bright, a young technician who had helped Grace and me trace the failing systems weeks earlier, and Ella Marsh, a supply officer whose calm nerves had kept half the crew from panicking during the worst of the disturbances. As our transport pulled away from Kesh Station, I held the hilt against my chest and felt it warm gently, not with alarm this time, but with something closer to quiet recognition. Whatever waited for us at Haviland, I would not be walking toward it as the same frightened man who had once leaned against a display case just to rest his knee. I would be walking toward it as someone who had already learned the one lesson that mattered most, that holding on, even when everyone wiser had already let go, was sometimes the only thing standing between an ordinary life and an entire door left open to the dark. I do not know how many more doors remain out there, silent and waiting for someone willing enough to answer them. I do not know if I will always find the strength to hold on the way I did that first night. What I do know is this. Nobody chose me because I was the best option available. They chose me because I was the one still standing when everyone better suited had already walked away. And that, more than any blade or ancient oath, turned out to be exactly enough.